Welcome to Turning Point. I'm Becky Alfrey. In today's show, we go on location to one of the most desirable states to live in. Many of the residents also visit our beautiful desert cities. Sometimes we refer to them as snowbirds. My old hometown, Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, has the most beautiful weather in the summers. Joining us on the Highline Canal today is Mayor Doug Tisdale, who shares some of his turning points and his vision of making a difference locally and globally. Doug?
Thank you very much, Becky. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and to share Cherry Hills Village with you, because Cherry Hills Village is not only one of the most desirable suburbs of America to live in. According to the Wall Street Journal, it's the #1 best suburb of America to live in. And that's something that we are very proud of here in Cherry Hills Village. And here we are today on the Highline Canal Trail, which is a big part of what we find as the most desirable part of Cherry Hills Village. You know, in terms of politics, you've asked me about how I got involved in politics. Back in 2000, my wife asked me to run for council because at the time, she was the chairman of the board of trustees at St. Mary's Academy. And the city council was giving St. Mary's Academy a great deal of grief about an expansion that they wanted to do on their campus located here in Cherry Hills Village. So she came home from that meeting and she said, "You've got to run for council and straighten them out." So I said the two words that gave me 31 years of wedded bliss, "Yes, dear." And I ran for city council. I was on the council from 2000 until 2008, having run for re-election in 2004. I was mayor pro tem for the last 2 years of that. And although my political life probably began a number of years before that, my life in politics began in 2000. After being elected to the council, I became very involved in the Denver Regional Council of Governments, DRCOG, we call it Dr. Cog, and the Colorado Municipal League, and also became involved with a number of other public and nonprofit ventures, such as being appointed by the governor to the Colorado State Board of Registered Psychotherapists. And I was also on the Vail Valley Medical Center board for about 15 years. I was the chairman of the board of the Eagle Health Care Center. I was the chairman of the board of the Colorado Neurological Institute. So you can see a lot of the healthcare nonprofits have always been very important to me. I am pleased to say that as mayor of Cherry Hills Village, I've become known as the regionalist mayor of Cherry Hills Village because I'm very engaged in the region. And I want to make sure that all of the cities around the Denver region understand that Cherry Hills Village is eager, willing, and able to play an important part in their growth and development and in their progress, because it means progress to Cherry Hills Village as well. Because every time a new company moves into the region, the people who are important to that company find that they want to live in Cherry Hills Village. So some other city will get the business, our residents will get the services that come from that business, and our realtors will enjoy the fact that our homes will be purchased by the people who run those companies. And that's very important to us. In addition to being a regionalist, I've also been focused on being a globalist in Cherry Hills Village. And specifically, I have been asked by Mayor Hancock to work with him with Sister Cities International and by the Denver Regional Council of Governments to work in terms of creating a greater partnership with the Denver region and the city and county of Denver with cities all around the world. That's been a terrific opportunity to show that Cherry Hills Village, once again, is an important participant in all of this collaboration and cooperation for the growth and development of the Denver region. But through the course of all of that, I haven't forgotten my roots. I have worked very hard to try to create a wonderful environment for Cherry Hills Village, and you're standing in part of it right now on the Highline Canal Trail. In just the last year, I was able to negotiate a transaction where we received a gift of a 2.5-acre parcel right adjacent to our village center that has an appraised value of about $1.5 million. And that was gifted to the city of Cherry Hills Village so that we could develop the Allen Hutto Memorial Commons. And on that commons, we're going to build a small informal performance venue so that students from our schools will be able to go on down to the commons and put on a show. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to see happening in Cherry Hills Village. Another part of my roots in Cherry Hills Village is actually getting very engaged with all of the students here in Cherry Hills Village. We have 3 schools in Cherry Hills. We've got Cherry Hills Village Elementary. We have Kent Denver School, which just sits on the other side of Blackmer Common over here. And we have St. Mary's Academy. In addition, we have West Middle School that sits just across the boundary from Cherry Hills Village, where many of our students attend, and Cherry Creek High School as well. I wanted to engage the students in a very direct way, and I wanted to be able to create something that we could put on our local cable channel. Let's have a mayor's competition for student-produced videos celebrating the beauty, history, legacy, and value of the Highline Canal Trail. And here we sit on the Highline Canal Trail right in front of Margot's Meadow over here, and this particular area was used by a lot of the students in creating their videos. So now we have on our channel 7 videos that were the grand prize winner and the first place winner for high school and the first place winner for middle school, along with some honorable mentions that celebrate the Highline Canal Trail. A turning point for me in politics was when I came to the realization that the road to progress is actually a one-way road, and you have to travel down that road. And when you travel the road and you happen to notice that there's a car wreck on the right side of the road, and then there's a car wreck on the left side of the road, you will find yourself getting to your destination of progress faster, safer, more effectively if you can chart a course down the middle of that road. And I have found that to be very successful, not only in the city of Cherry Hills Village, but in working with the Denver region and in working with the global interests that we have engaged over the course of my years in politics. One of the ways I think that we've been able to achieve unanimity in all of our decisions on council during my tenure as mayor, other than those 2 small exceptions, is that I learned also in politics that keeping the peace, as people will say, is not a goal in and of itself. It's not a target in and of itself. Keeping the peace is an attitude that you have. Keeping the peace is an approach that you have. And if you have that attitude and that approach, you will, in fact, keep the peace, and then you will achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and you will create progress in your community and make it a good community, and make it a good region, and make it a good state. Good morning, how are you all? Yes, Joan, how are you, dear?
Got my gloves on. I'm good.
Good to see you, how are you?
Hi, Julie.
Yes, Julie, how are you? God bless you, dear. Hello there, how are you?
Yes. Becky Alfrey, how are you doing? How are you doing?
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Isn't it great? This is perfect. And what we're doing here, we're doing this for Becky's show out in California, but also we are, as of this afternoon, going to go live on channel 22, which is our cable channel, and we're going to start having real things. And we start off with the mayor's competition for student-produced videos on the Highline Canal. Those will be on channel 22 starting today. And then we will have, this show is probably going to take, 4 to 6 weeks for production. A big part of our equestrian community is represented right here. And it's very important to us. Very important to us.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's a place to live.
Yeah, what do you think, huh?
Coming up, Mayor Doug Tisdale shares some turning points in his life.
In 2002, I had a significant turning point in my life. Here I was in the middle of my council term, which is a 4-year term, and I told the then sitting mayor that I had thought about it and I wanted to run for mayor. And he said, well, I'm not going to run against you. I'm not going to contest you. So I thought, well, boy, that was pretty easy. I said, this is a good idea, running for mayor. I'll just be able to walk in. And everyone to whom I spoke said, you're a natural for mayor. That'll be great. That's terrific. Yes, of course you should run. That's fine. So I filled out nominating petitions, got the signatures, filed it. I was on record. On the last day that nominating petitions were allowed, someone else filled out a nominating petition, had the appropriate signatures, and filed that. And I said, well, I don't know this fellow. He's not involved in city government. He doesn't do anything here in Cherry Hills Village. Maybe I better make some phone calls, but I think I probably have this one. And everyone that I spoke with said, you're going to get elected. Nobody knows him. That's no issue. I didn't realize that he was busy walking the streets and knocking on doors and talking to people and saying, what do you want to hear? Okay, that's what I'll do. And I continued somewhat in a cloud. And I remember even on election day, I had a phone call from a constituent here in Cherry Hills Village who said, look, I've got this ballot here, but do I even need to bother filling this out and turning it in? And I said, well, gosh, it is an election. You really should, and I would appreciate it if you'd vote for me. He says, well, if I have a chance, then I'll do it. It was a mail-in ballot, and everybody, could drop it off if they wanted to, but you didn't even have to go to the village center. I went to the village center on election night for the result counting. I lost. Lost by just a few votes, but I lost. And that was a significant turning point in my life because I realized then that I, number one, didn't do what I should have done to get something. And I also realized that maybe I wasn't supposed to be mayor because I was just a little too cocky about the whole thing and a little too full of myself. And then in January of 2003, my father passed away. And I'll tell you more about that. And then in January of 2004, my wife passed away. And I realized, boy, somebody is writing with a very large hand a message to me. And I need to start paying attention to that message. And I guess one of the things that I started paying attention to in the message was that I really hadn't quite figured out all the things that were truly important to me, because the most important things to me had been taken away from me. And I had to pause and think long and hard about what was really important and what should I be doing. It came time for re-election as a council member in 2004, and I decided then that I was going to run for re-election. And I told people that the important thing for me was that I needed to honor my wife. She's the one who got me there, and in the ordinary course, presumably I would have run for re-election. She would have wanted to see me run for re-election. That was the path she put me on. And I needed to honor her legacy, because it's a significant legacy in Colorado in terms of her influence on municipal law and government particularly. So I needed to honor that. And I needed to be able to finish in my own mind and in my own way the rediscovery of Doug Tisdale. And I thought that was the best forum for me to do that rediscovery. So that was a big turning point. And those 3 events leading up to it were big turning points that brought me to a different place. And I think, on balance, a better place. I hope that I have been successful in communicating to my children, my friends, my family, my constituents, that I'm really a much better person than I ever was before in my life, and I'm a much better person because I went through all those difficult challenges in my life. And I guess that's the lesson I was supposed to take away from that.
We all experience loss because everyone dies. However, Mayor Doug Tisdale shares a philosophy that enables us to find strength to honor one's passing.
One thing that is present for all of us, that I have had a fair share of, but that impacts everyone at some point or another, is dealing with loss and the grief that follows it. We have grief, we have mourning, we have loss. They're all related concepts, each slightly different. I lost my brother, I lost my grandparents, I lost my godparents, then I lost my mother in 1994, and that was actually one that was easier to understand because that was God's trade with us. Because in May, just 10 days before his graduation from high school, Doug Jr., the Doug, fell 80 feet off of a cliff at Red Rocks in a dead drop onto the ground below. And when you fall 80 feet and you hit the ground, you bounce. And then he fell again, and it was in the second one that he hit his head, and we were concerned about the extent of a traumatic brain injury. Doug, if he walked in that door today, you would not know had ever been through anything. He just finished a half marathon up in Georgetown over the weekend. He's running the Detroit Marathon, which will be, I think, his 17th marathon in a couple of months. He's in fine shape now. 2 months after that, my mother, who had prayed ceaselessly, good Italian that she was, prayed ceaselessly for his recovery, and I know in my heart of hearts she made a bargain with God. If you save him, you can have me. And so she passed away. And then 9 years after that, my father passed away, and then the year after that, my wife passed away. I have come to know that all of these things happen to everybody. You're not special because you had 12 people in your family die. Okay, you had 12 people in your family who were eligible to die. How were they eligible? They were alive. And so you deal with that. But I did tell the children when their mother passed away, never in your life use your mother's death as an excuse for anything. It cheapens her and it demeans you. Do not do that. And I honestly believe to this day they have not. And I hope that I have not. Because there is too much greatness in every person's life to have the ending of that life serve as an excuse for you not to live your life. Your job is to celebrate their life, not to use their death as your crutch. That's a lesson I would hope that we all find the energy, the strength, the grace to learn.
When standing on a corner where several streets come together, there is always a choice. Which direction do we choose? Often, that person standing right next to us is not an accident, but rather a messenger. And so, Mayor Doug Tisdale shares a game-changing moment.
I was at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor from 1969 to 71 as an undergraduate, having transferred from Regis College in Denver after 2 years at Regis. And I decided at that point that I was really going to focus on the psychology, which I had discovered at Regis College. Had a great professor, Harry Hoescher, at Regis College in Denver, was a phenomenal psychologist and professor, and a great inspiration. So I knew I wanted to go on in psychology because I had been dissuaded to some extent by my parents from the idea of really wanting to pursue acting as a career as opposed to an avocation. So I was into psychology. Well, at that time, that's why I gave you the time frame, 1969 to 1971. There's a lot going on in the country, 1969 and 1971. You've got Vietnam ramping up incredibly. You've got the draft initiated for the first time. You've got lots and lots of students from the baby boom generation filling schools. At the University of Michigan, the psychology department had over 600 full-time professors, associate professors, assistant professors, full professors, instructors. There were thousands of students studying psychology at the University of Michigan and elsewhere around the country. I decided I wanted to be a clinical psychologist because I wanted to effect change in people's lives. I wanted to be able to help people. I had gone through a number of things in my own life with my brother's death and with, obviously all four of my grandparents passed away, and my mother had horrific surgeries that she had to go through her life. So I knew that there were lots of challenges that people would face, and I wanted to help people to address those challenges, to help effect change in their lives. Well, I thought the best way to do that would be a clinical psychologist. Unfortunately, I was not unique in that thought. There were many other people who wanted to be clinical psychologists, and the schools that had graduate programs in clinical psychology were accepting 4 or 5 candidates a year, period. And there were about, I think, 8 or 12 schools in the country who were engaged in a PhD program in clinical psychology. That made it pretty slim pickings. I did not get accepted into any graduate program in clinical psychology. And I remember at the end of that year being rather distressed, and I was going to take a job at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan and work there while I was figuring things out. And I was talking with my honors psychology counselor at U of M. I was with a fellow student, and we ran into him on a street corner. And we're sitting there talking and going through bemoaning our situation that we couldn't find anything in our chosen fields. And he knew me and he knew what I wanted to do. He'd been a counselor for a couple years. And he told me that, you know, Doug, I've always thought if you really want to effect change, rather than going to graduate school in psychology, what you really ought to do is go to law school. So here I am standing on the corner with this man for whom I had great respect and admiration, telling me that I ought to consider law school. Well, I had thought about law school as many other people had through that time, simply because it was there and it was available and it seemed a fashionable thing to do, particularly for people who didn't know what they wanted to do. And I wondered if that would be the right course. I guess it turned out that it was. I guess it turned out that it was. I decided that I would apply to law school. I applied to one law school. I said, you know, if this is supposed to be, that's all it takes. I applied to the University of Michigan Law School. I was there. I then found out the University of Michigan Law School was one of the top 3 law schools in the country. I was admitted. I guess it was meant to be. That was a turning point. And I guess what better place to discover it than standing on a corner, listening to someone whom you admire and respect.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you would like to see other Turning Points, please look up our website, TurningPoints4Life.com, or call 760-296-3849 to share your turning points. And thank you for watching.